There's no doubt that, and thanks for having me speak today. There's no doubt that the use of blockchain and other decentralized technologies um, have grown rapidly in recent years, and the presentations, last two presentations, really show that. And it's been obviously driven by potential gains in productivity, efficiency, resilience, and transparency. And the last two presentations are really good indications of that. And these gains really come in part from the new ways of transacting and exchanging information enabled by blockchain and embodied by the rise in decentralized markets, autonomous organizations, and the ability to turn physical assets and objects into digital goods. So, and while many of the products and services that are transacted on blockchain networks are not new, these new markets do have novel dynamics and differ in important ways to traditional means of doing business. And so they do pose some new issues and questions around market governance and regulation. So it does mean that we are moving from uh, the concept from concept to revenue in blockchain innovation, and we're not just talking about technology. The policy environment is also of critical importance, and this is what the OECD is most focused on. We have been now for the last 3 years through our Global Blockchain Policy Centre. And uh, I want to use my time today to really do three things. One is to highlight the regulatory context of digital assets in finance, because this is blockchain's most developed area of use. And so it also holds lessons for the technology's future in other sectors. So it is very relevant, even if you're not in finance. And secondly, I'll reflect on how this does flow through to developments in other sectors beyond financial services. And thirdly, I'll highlight what we can do at the national level to start developing a consistent global policy environment. So if we go first to the regulatory context of digital assets, um, you know, in terms of finance, I'll observe again that so far digital assets and other blockchain financial innovations are not fundamentally new products. They're just new ways of doing old things. For example, tokenization merely, as was mentioned previously, merely replaces one digital technology with another. That is replacing centralized electronic book entries in a securities register with a cryptography enabled securities based on a distributed network. And so it actually just means that regulators should be able to apply a largely technology neutral approach when regulating these products. They're new, but if they're going to meet their mandates, it's actually they've got to look at it on a neutral basis. So, and their mandates include looking at financial stability, market integrity, and promoting competition, which I think is very important. However, either because of the unique characteristics of blockchain networks, or because the entrance of non-traditional actors and business models into such a highly regulated industry, there are additional areas that need to be considered. And I just want to highlight 6 conclusions from the OECD's research into digital asset products and practices and our close engagement, which has been over a number of years now with industry. The first thing is that it can be difficult for market participants to know with certainty whether certain digital assets fall within the regulatory perimeter. And I do know that from my experience being chairman of the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. So we've seen this in play with high-profile sanctions against blockchain-based finance companies in the United States in recent months. So this is the first thing. It's a problem. The second is potential gaps in the regulatory treatment of assets may give rise to regulatory arbitrage and therefore a lack of a level playing field. The third thing is existing regulation may need to apply to new actors, such as trusted third parties guaranteeing the accuracy of information going onto the chain. Well, that's nothing new, but it is something that needs to be thought about. Fourthly, is new requirements may need to be considered to achieve regulatory mandates, okay, that I mentioned previously, such as interoperability between DLTs or gateways linking the on-chain and off-chain environments. Fifthly, is just new risks may arise from the application of DLT technologies potentially new or novel operational risks. Again, they've just got to be thought about. And 6 is regulatory or legal ambiguity around asset tokenization can create uncertainties and risk for participants in tokenization of markets, which actually then undermines the smooth functioning of such marketplaces. So again, these are not unsolvable problems. So while policymakers have been most concerned with the financial markets, blockchain innovation, including tokenization of non-financial real-world assets, has been accelerating in other sectors. And this brings me to my second point on developments elsewhere in the economy. Market regulators and supervisory bodies in other areas of the economy may run into those challenges that I've just mentioned in the financial regulators when they're looking at new decentralized activities interacting with existing laws and regulations. So some specific examples is, first of all, determining the ownership of tokenized real-world assets, which could in turn become a financial markets issue. Secondly, is the legality of smart contracts. Thirdly, is accountability in networks, such as a single accountable point, which is often required in existing regulatory regimes, such as corporate governance rules, which don't exist in new business models like decentralized autonomous organizations. And fourthly, is the scope for potential judicial intervention or redress, particularly in open public networks. And when we consider the policy environment shaping blockchain innovation and influencing adoption, it goes well beyond financial regulation, which is often, as I said, the main area of focus. We need, again, to take a whole of economy perspective, and this will be most effective if it's done in reference to global developments and with an eye to cross-border consistency, because it's all about a level playing field, both domestically and internationally. So, in terms of globalizing that national policy environment, the OECD has been focused over this year on helping governments do exactly that, which brings me again to my final point on what we can be doing to connect the national and the international policy development. We've drawn from dozens of OECD research papers and hundreds of hours of industry consultation to develop guiding principles and recommendations for both actors using and designing blockchain systems and for governments in developing the policy environment around those systems. So for blockchain actors, we do need to codify a set of expectations that address many of the issues that I've actually mentioned earlier, including, first of all, one is complying with the relevant policy, legal, and regulatory requirements, and this extends to a lot more decentralized and public networks. So it's important to understand what their mandates are when you're trying to develop something. I can say that from being on the other side. Secondly, governance and accountability and transparency, including the need to be open and inclusive about the design of the network protocols and incentives. So this is something we keep coming back to. Thirdly is interoperability between blockchain, non-blockchain networks to support the flow of data, encourage competition, and empower individuals' control over their personal data. Fourthly is digital security, which is about understanding the risks and taking responsibility for business continuity and the treatment, again, of personal data. For governments, on the other hand, we seeing a need to, first of all, develop a coordinated policy strategies concerning blockchain, which are innovation friendly and takes into account the technology's cross-border nature. Secondly, is supporting blockchain research, development, and investment, creating that right environment. Thirdly, is to strive to build skills and capacity around blockchain, including through education and training. Fourthly, as I said, is creating that enabling policy environment, which means consulting widely on regulation and policy, and developing institutional capabilities and mechanisms to best understand and address the technology's impact on policy priorities. For example, as you see in many countries, regulatory sandboxes or innovation labs. It's something we did in Australia, and it's being done in many countries. Fifthly, is cooperating internationally on blockchain, including driving consistency in national approaches and promoting fair and open processes for global technical and ethical standards. And this kind of guidance would set a common foundation for blockchain policies, ready to be expanded upon for the issue of specific regulational guidance. For example, the OECD has a policy toolkit for tokenization for regulators slated for release later this year. And as I said, this guidance is still under development, and we're launching a public consultation on the final shape of it in the next month. But wherever we end up will stand as a much needed common global reference point as governments develop national strategies, and a key building block in making the global national and the national global when it comes to blockchain, and that enabling environment and a level playing field. Thank you.